first. OMG, the CIA have been secretly operating in Ukraine for a decade.
Let's start the broadcast here with this one.
I came to the conclusion that there are two interesting targets, the bridge in the east and the ammunition depots above.
Что, похоже, немцы ничего не поняли. Но если так вот отвлечься от сегодняшнего разговора, вот что мы увидели, услышали? Рассуждение о том, как за чужой спиной воевать с Россией.
Blindspot 101, Smoking Sauerkraut, the German plot to bomb Russian bridge to Crimea as well as CIA bases in Ukraine exposed. This is while former President Dmitri Medvedev reveals a fundamentally redrawn Ukrainian map. But we start off in the past 24 hours. This is 5th of March, yesterday. A Russian naval vessel in the Black Sea was attacked by a Ukrainian drone. We kick off with this because today we are delving into some blind spots that hide in the plain sight of the Russia-Ukraine NATO conflict. So it is possible to say that at this stage the world needs more tension and confrontation, friction and fragmentation, or as we like to call it, frigmentation, as much as Blindspot needs a bullet in the head or a bunker-busting bomb to hit its facilities. Nevertheless, whether you look east, west, north, south, or to the stars, it seems as if at least one of the four horsemen of the apocalypse is having a grand time sowing seeds of destruction wherever it goes. The image you're seeing on the screen now is actually Blindspot has been using Gab. If you go to Gab, G-A-B.ai, interesting artificial intelligence experiment that they're doing to generate your own text to image or other things. So Blindspot has been using some artificial intelligence. We'll show some other images later on. Something we've referred to before in Blindspot is the 2007, I think, speech that President Putin gave at the Munich Security Conference. Then already raising a serious concern regarding NATO and, well, NATO expansion into former Soviet territories, warning that it will ultimately cross a red line. Now, that's still at a high level, macro strategic level of positioning. And what we're looking into today in Blindspot is a few specific stories that illustrate the extent and the depth of not just Western military forces backing or governments backing the Ukrainian system and military, but also the physical deployment of people and facilities on the Russian border. So, the first case is on 17 January of this year. The Russians struck a building in Kharkiv that killed up to 60 French mercenaries that were there supporting the Ukrainian war effort. This was, of course, seriously denied by the French at first, but the information that's come through subsequently shows this is actually an actual event that took place, meaning not direct French official forces being deployed, but most likely tacitly supported by French authorities or people in power. Then the next story that breaks is senior German officers discussing how to covertly infiltrate and, among other things, bomb the Russian bridge to Crimea. So let's quickly first look at a clip on the Kharkiv attack, and we will then talk more about the case of the Germans smoking sauerkraut and thinking they can sabotage Russia. So we move from France to Germany, where recently audio recording surfaced that was acknowledged even by the German Chancellor that this actually happened. It's a leaked recording of a conference call between very senior officers in the Luftwaffe, the German Air Force, talking about how do they get Taurus missile systems into Ukraine, number one. Number two, discussing targets. For example, the bridge between Russia that links Russia to the Crimean Peninsula, as well as ammunition dumps, etc., etc. So this caused a huge outcry, not just in Russia, but of course then also in Germany. Firstly, how did this leak happen? Are our systems secure from electronic methods of surveilling what the senior German officers are talking about? So we'll just listen to a short clip from the actual recording. We also see how Martin Armstrong from Armstrong Economics says that numerous sources in Germany believe that this is not just genuine, but that the Ministry of Defense on March the 3rd confirmed that this conversation did actually take place. Once again, showing evidence of a Western government directly conspiring to deploy secret means, methods to strike at Russian infrastructure. So as we have overt kinetic war unfolding in the eastern Ukraine, we also have this covert war going on. Let's see what they have to say from the German side.
Let's start the broadcast here. These leaked audio recordings coming out, of which we will cover them, all the important details in their entirety, but let's start with this one.
I came to the conclusion that there are two interesting targets, the bridge in the east and the ammunition depots above. The bridge in the east is hard to reach. It's a rather small target, but the Taurus can do it. The ammunition depots can also be hit. I don't know if we can train the Ukrainians for such a task in a short time, and we are talking about a month.
So we're going to stop it there. We'll take that up a little bit further in just a few minutes. So many thought it, at least it was being reported initially, that this was Russian disinformation. We haven't heard that storyline before. But quickly, that storyline falls apart. Germany's defense ministry confirmed the authenticity of a recording leaked by Russia's state media in which high-ranking military officers secretly discuss aid for Ukraine. That's putting it softly. As aired on Telegram, the audio recordings include a discussion about whether Taurus cruise missiles would be capable of destroying a bridge, seemingly a reference to the new bridge linking Russian-occupied Crimea to the Russian mainland.
Now let's hear from former Russian President Dmitri Medvedev, who, in response to this revelation of the Germans conspiring, revealed a map of a completely redrawn Ukraine, and at the same time making statements like, you know, these Western countries can be very glad that the commander-in-chief of the Russian armed forces has a rather cool head. And maybe half joking, he then says, you know, if this was 100 or 200 years ago and they received this kind of report in the Russian Empire, it would have been war immediately. Let's hear what Medvedev has to say.
Что, похоже, немцы ничего не поняли и ничему не научились. Но если так вот отвлечься от сегодняшнего разговора, вот что мы увидели, услышали? Рассуждение о том, как за чужой спиной воевать с Россией. Уничтожать наши гражданские объекты, которыми пользуется масса людей. И они на холодном глазу это все обсуждают, потому что вот это им сейчас нужно. Причем нужно делать таким образом, чтобы их голова не торчала. Ну, послушайте, это вот хорошо, что в руководстве России люди с холодной головой, и что наш верховный главнокомандующий к этому спокойно относится. Вот я сейчас вспоминал историю. Представляете, что было бы там 100, 150, 200 лет назад, получи вот такую депешу или доклад, значит, в мире. Да немедленно бы война началась. Вот, поэтому мы, конечно, будем проявлять сдержанность, но мы это все запомним.
So far we've dealt with the French, we've dealt with the Germans, now we get to the United States of America and the Central Intelligence Agency. The New York Times also, in a recent article, goes into lyrical explanation of how since 2014, very specifically, it's pointed out in the article, since 2014, the Central Intelligence Agency has been constructing secret underground bunker bases all along the border between Russia and the Ukraine. In the article, it says these bunkers are fully equipped by the United States. The CIA and other American intelligence agencies provide intelligence for targeted missile strikes to track Russian troop movements and to help support spy networks. Of course, spy networks that will infiltrate the territory of the Russian Federation to launch attacks inside the country. Now, they say this took root all more than a decade ago, but what's interesting is that the listening post in a Ukrainian forest is part of a network of spy bases, and there's 12 of them in total. Now, around 2016, the CIA began training, for example, elite Ukrainian commando forces, the commando force known as Unit 2245, which captured Russian drones and communications gear so that the CIA technicians can reverse engineer and crack Russian encryption systems. So we've known this all along, that there's not just mercenaries, but people from Western military forces inside Ukraine providing support through technological means or for these advanced weapon systems that are being deployed. But here's the point once again. We can have no illusions about the dynamic on the ground of covert, overt, kinetic war and the implications of this, that we are really playing with fire on this planet in terms of not just escalation, but where do you escalate from here? Should, or for example, months ago already when the talk was about F-16, Western F-16 fighters being deployed in Ukraine, the Russians made a comment, but look, if these things operate from the Ramstein airbase in Germany, for example, it's a legitimate target because it's being deployed against us and our forces. So let's see what the Corbett report has to say on this CIA base revelation.
Back to New World next week. I'm James Corbett of CorbettReport.com.
And I am James Evan Pilato of MediaMonarchy.com. But first, OMG, the CIA have been secretly operating in Ukraine for a decade. Another important piece from antiwar.com, the CIA helped build 12 secret spy bases in Ukraine along the Russian border as part of the agency's support for Ukrainian intelligence that started in 2014. The New York Times were allowed or perhaps instructed to report this past Sunday. The report described one of the CIA-built spy bases as an underground bunker used by Ukrainian soldiers to track Russian spy satellites and eavesdrop on conversations between Russian commanders. The Times report sheds new light on the CIA's involvement in Ukraine, played a major role in provoking the Russian invasion. A European official told the paper that when Russian President Vladimir Putin was considering invading Ukraine towards the end of 2021, the head of one of Russia's main spy services told him that CIA and MI6 were controlling Ukraine and turning it into a beachhead for operations against Moscow. The report said the CIA's relationship with Ukrainian intelligence could be traced back specifically to February 24th, 2014, right after Ukrainian President Viktor Yanukovych was ousted in a USA-backed coup.
100, we may be featuring some of the activities in the Bunker 42 food system. So on the 2nd of March, we planted a new round of seeds, cucumbers, leeks, and spinach. So we will update you maybe once every few weeks on the progress of our seeds and to tell the story of creating your own.
Сын спрашивает у папы: папа, почему так холодно? А он говорит: потому что Россия напала на Украину. Ребенок спрашивает: а мы здесь при чем? А мы ввели санкции против русских. Зачем? Чтобы им было плохо. А мы что, русские?